Hey, welcome back to the Do Good Work podcast. Today, I'm excited to introduce Corey Quinn. Corey is a true testament of resilience and success. Corey's journey to becoming the man who helped scale an agency from 20 million to 150 million wasn't an easy one. Fresh out of college, he ventured into the startup world, facing the highs of raising 3 million in capital to the lows of seeing it all fall apart. These experiences were not just financially taxing, but emotionally draining as well. With a new wife and baby on the way, Corey shifted his gears from startups to agency sales and eventually moving into corporate marketing. There, he discovered that success wasn't just about the numbers, but about forging genuine human connections. In his last agency, Corey and his team transformed their marketing approach, leading to an incredible growth from 20 million to 150 million in just 7 years, and pioneering the concept of deep specialization. Now, Corey is on a mission to empower agency founders through mentoring, consulting, and coaching. And with a 25-year track record of success, he's sharing his insights on this podcast today. And I think you're going to be in on a real treat where we dive into his work on deep specialization. Corey,
Hey,
welcome to the
what's
pod.
up, Raul? Hey, thanks, man. I'm excited to be here.
I love it. I want to dive into a few things that I think that we need to build off of in terms of a baseline, because I want to cover those bases first, get your take on it, get like your flavor, your mix, your point of view. But I really want to dive deep on a few of these things. And the two core axes that I think that we're going to be pivoting around are why specialization matters. Because I know that you talk to founders, I talk to founders, we talk to a lot of entrepreneurs and marketers. They're afraid of just honing or quote unquote pigeonholing themselves. That's the first thing.
Yeah.
But I want to like break that idea around when you do that, you can actually create a new category and what that actually opens up for you in terms of your operations and how you can run things. And the second, I think that is closely married, which I appreciate from the book, is relationships in marketing and in sales. Because the things that your take is like a fresh take on some of the David C. Baker's work with some classy frameworks, which I think tie back to like how business should be done in our super like personalization at scale ecosystem that we're living in right now.
Definitely. Sure. Let's jump off.
Let's dive in, man. So can you dive through some of the frameworks and ideas you have around deep specialization and why that matters?
So we live in a world, as you said, where access to data is basically unlimited. And an ambitious founder, whether it be an agency guy who wants to start an agency or a SaaS, can easily go and acquire a list of businesses across any industry and do effectively what is called spam your TAM. Just basically do a bunch of emailing, see what comes back, and all these tools around email automation and sequencing and texting and all these different channels have made it very easy to do that. And I think the trend is to take a low risk approach to developing a business, which is you do a tremendous lot of marketing, see what comes back and go from there. And I think that there's nothing inherently wrong with that approach. However, if you think about it from the receiver's side, the person who's receiving that message, you're not the only one who's sending a message today. In fact, I was talking to a client of my client the other day who is a med spa owner. This woman's in her 40s and 50s and somewhere in there. It's a guess, but based on the length of her business, she's was shared with me as, look, I love working with my client, the agency, but I get approached every single day, multiple times a day, 10, 15 attempts a day. And that's across phone calls, it's across email, text messages, and so on and so forth. And it's all noise, it's overwhelming. And so unfortunately, or fortunately, the world that maybe existed 5-10 years ago where the sort of the spam your TAM approach would work. And I use that term with tongue in cheek, but really it's a broad-based approach. It's very difficult to get any real traction in that approach. And in fact, what I've seen through my experiences as the chief marketing officer of a digital marketing agency that we were able to grow from 20 million to 150 million, and as well as working with my clients, as well as interviewing folks and my successful agency owners on my podcast, the thing that is sort of the thread that ties all of these success stories across each of these experiences, these business owners, is number one, they've verticalized or they've taken a specialization approach. Mm-hmm. And it's not just a sort of a volume-based approach. They take what I call deep specialization, which is effectively the combination of focus, which is saying yes to one vertical market and saying no to many others. It's harkening back to what Warren Buffett said, which is that The difference between successful people and really successful people is that really successful people say no more often. And
Hmm.
so it's this idea of having a focus. Number two is having a strategy. And I call that, what I mean by strategy is having a massive action plan that gives you a durable competitive advantage, doing the right things in the right order. And then the third thing is having something called empathy, caring, giving a damn, which is not typically discussed a lot when you think about what's our target, our TAM, a total addressable market, or who are we
Hmm.
targeting? And what I found in these conversations and in my own experience is that you really, in some ways, need to become dedicated or committed to serving a specific vertical market. And empathy certainly plays a role in that. And when you're able to take the combination of the focus, the strategy, and the empathy, what I call deep specialization, you're actually able to build a business that has a long-term sustainable business model, and one that has things like profitability, scalability, and also is type of business that acquirers like to buy. So that is a big part of my passion today, which is to help other entrepreneurs embrace deep specialization.
When you talk about the empathy approach, it isn't just care because you have to care and that's part of the mission statement, you slap it on the wall, but it's more an approach to you're building a long-term, like thinking in 25-year chunks. I don't think you explicitly say that, but the actions and the activities that you outline of when you
Sure.
go to associations or host booths or you give away things, like you're
Yeah.
actually building a deep network, like an actual deep relationship based network in that industry, being known for something specifically. So it's more of a, for me, it was like a refresher. Like it was very
Yeah.
refreshing to see that. Okay, this is really interesting. This is different versus just the quick hits, quick wins mentality that I've been seeing a lot online, and which is not
Yeah.
ideal. The one thing that you hit, like one of the aha moments that I want to lean into now that we understand that specialization allows you not just to cater to services for one market, maybe create peripheral offerings in that same market with SaaS or consulting or the done for you services, is the adage that only 3 or 5% of your market is buying right now, but you don't focus on them. You focus on what I like, what you called it, and I appreciate it, the zone of indifference. It's so
That's
true.
right.
I think you said that. I thought I saw some of the agencies that I hired and that I'm working with. I am indifferent. If someone came with a better offer and a better relationship with a better outcome, or like just a better relationship, really, I'd be like, why not? Like, why not just make
Yeah.
the switch? Talk to me more about that zone of indifference and how to like
Sure.
actually lean into that.
Sure. Let's say, for argument's sake, let's say you're a digital marketing agency targeting attorneys.
Mhm.
And out of all, and let's make it even more specific. Let's say family law attorneys are the area where you specialize in. You have empathy, you care about that industry, you might have a point of view about that industry. And out of all of the family law attorneys who use agencies, statistically speaking, about 80% of them are in this zone of indifference. What is this zone of indifference? If you lay all of those law firms in a normal distribution curve, you have obviously the hump is in the middle and you have the tails on the side. And what you find on one end of the extreme of the distribution curve are clients or attorneys who are extremely happy with their agency. They're the evangelists. They're the ones that are promoting the agency to their colleagues. They're actively advocating. And that's a very small percentage of all agency relationships for these family law attorneys. On the other end of the distribution curve, the other tail are the ones that are in the market. This is the 3 to 5% that you reference, who are
Mhm.
actively searching. They're on Google. They know they need to make a change. But then in the middle is like about 80% of these businesses, these family law firms, are indifferent to their current solution. To your point,
Mhm.
you know, if another agency came in that had a better offer, that understood them better, that had maybe better client success stories and so on and so forth. I'll give you an example. So my wife, I mentioned this in the book. My wife has an iPhone 11. We're on,
Mhm.
as this recording, it's an iPhone. We're on the iPhone 15. She loves the phone, but unfortunately, the battery life is not great. The memory is shot and it crashes and whatnot. And so she really needs to be in the market for a new phone. She needs to be at that one end of the dissatisfied end of the market, but she's really in that zone of difference. And I think the thing that causes her to pause before just going out and getting another phone is that she's really worried about losing all the photos on the phone, which of course is not a real thing, but that's keeping her in this situation where it's not the best situation, but
It
I'm
is
going
what
to
it
hold
is.
on to it. It is what it is. And what if there was a concierge service that would come and get her photos off the phone and help her just get set up on the new phone? Of course, she would switch in a heartbeat. And in many respects, based on this example, she's in that zone of indifference. She's not so much in so much pain that she is looking to make a replacement, but she's certainly not screaming from the rooftops about how happy she is with her iPhone 11.
And one of the things there too is going back to the empathy piece is understanding the fears of inaction, because it's almost like the death of a thousand
Yes.
lashes, or like the drip, the constant water drip. It's
Mm.
not annoying, but after 10,000 days or five, that like it becomes like an issue.
Yeah.
And that's something similar to keep in mind as we're looking to either break into a new market or go deeper with your current market. It's what are the real fears or beliefs that are holding them back? I have a simple image that I describe where your solution is from A to B, right? But there's beliefs and actions that are drawing and weighing them down to not take action. It's
Yes.
identifying what are those internal beliefs and how do you speak to
Mm.
them and how do you approach them with
Yeah.
that? Any thoughts on that? Or
The way I like to approach it is sort of borrowing a discipline from the lean movement and certainly product marketing, which is you do client interviews. And the purpose of an interview is to understand how and why. This specifically is a buyer's journey interview. And you're trying to understand through a discussion, a structured conversation, how and why your clients bought from you. And the reason why it's a conversation, it's not a survey, it's not like scraping reviews off of Amazon or something else, is that the benefit of being in an interview is that you get to ask follow-on questions. So you may ask a really well-formed question, you get a response, but the gold is really in the follow-up. So you said that the reason why you're not getting more reviews is because you forget to click the button. So can you tell me more about that? And then more and more, and
mm,
you get to really the core. And of course, in many cases, it's not the thing that's stopping them is not a thing of that's a functional challenge. It's more of a belief-based challenge. And there's no way you're going to be able to get to that through any of these other forms, the surveys and the online reviews. It's only through discussion, which is why I'm a big fan of these.
and I think through research, but also a sales agency that I had on the pod mentioned that it only
Mm.
takes about 12 interviews to find statistical significance or themes. I like to
It's
bring it
less
up
than that.
to it. It typically is around what is the
Yeah.
number nine or
Yeah, between they say, yeah, it's in that ballpark. Yeah, like seven to 10 to 11, 12. What happens is that any additional interviews you do after that, you don't get any new information. It's
yeah.
you get just a repeating. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's good to be able to predict what they're going to say in the follow-up interviews. I think it's just validating, like, hey, I know what's in your mind. You get to that
Yeah.
point. One of the things, though, as you lean into heavily is
Mhm.
in terms of what Scorpion is known for and what you did with the gifts, the unique, beacon,
Yeah.
striking, and impressive. Tell me why that works to shake people up in their zone of indifference,
Sure.
and yeah, kind of want to just dive into that first as we lean into
Yeah.
some
Well,
questions
the
around that.
I'll start by telling the end, and then I'll tell you where we started and
Okay.
how we got there. So the
Yeah.
end of was that by the time I left Scorpion at the end of 21, we were spending. We I had a, so I was my role was a chief marketing officer. My job was to help to grow the revenue of the agency, and we had a sales department of 100 people, not all salespeople. And of my $6 million annual budget, $3 million going to gifts. That's how important it was to
Mm.
the success of the growth of the agency. So that's where we ended. I'll tell you about where I started. So back in 2015, when I joined the company, the reason why I was hired at Scorpion was that the founder was really eager to grow the agency, and he was doing the chief marketing officer role. And what that means is effectively every 6 months or so, he would hire an agency to create a brochure, and he'd buy a list on Dun and Bradstreet and just send out the brochure to a bunch of attorneys. But ultimately, when I arrived, what I saw was a 6-person sales team they were all really, great guys driving great cars and not working very hard, and they were just subsisting off these great inbounds. Like that was this really great inbound machine. And of course, the challenge with inbounds is that you can't scale on inbounds alone. There's no lever to pull. You cannot. You're not in direct control of inbounds or referrals. Those things
Mm.
happen more organically. And so while the inbound machine was great, we wanted to do something else that would help us to accelerate the sales. What's the other thing that we could do is obviously going outbound, going out and buying lists and doing all these things. So the way we started was probably like what a lot of other agencies start, which is start cold calling. And
Mhm.
if you've ever cold called into attorneys, this is true today as it was back, in 2015, 16. You have something that's called a gatekeeper. It could be the front office person, the admin, the assistant. And their primary job is to prevent people from Scorpion to actually get in touch with the attorney. Like they're
Mhm.
screening these vendors out because they are perceived as being low value. And so, like everyone else, it was a low yield investment of our time and of our sales team time. So we decided to send ahead of a cold call, we would send ahead a FedEx box of gourmet cookies that were put into a beautiful tin box, put into a FedEx. And then, of course, the FedExes bypass the
Yeah.
gatekeepers because they're important documents. They have to go right to the attorney. So it goes right to the attorney's desk. They open it up and they experience these cookies. And by the way, these are like earth-shattering, amazingly delicious cookies. Like you have to hold the wall not to fall down like eating these things. So
Dang.
eventually they end up in the break room. And then, of course, everyone's trying the cookies. Everyone's like, who brought the cookies? And of course, the name Scorpion's like bouncing off all the walls. Everyone's talking about Scorpion. Who's Scorpion? Why'd they bring the cookie? I don't know. It's by the time the salesperson calls, the Scorpion's an already known quantity. And so instead of the typical resistance of, oh no, I'm sorry, the attorney's not available, to, oh, you're from Scorpion. Okay, hold on, let me put you through.
Yeah.
And so it bought us a little bit of, I don't know what the right term is, but effectively it was different. You mentioned USI, or uniquely striking impression.
Mm-hmm.
What we built was based on this success, obviously became a really important part of our marketing. We realized it needs to be unique. The gift has to be unique. It can't be just a logoed pen that everyone sends. It has to be striking. What that means is that it has to actually interrupt the attorney in a positive way. Like we're all walking through life in this kind of half hypnotic state. And so we had to wake them up a little bit, this gift, and it has to leave an impression. So at Scorpion, we were really positioning ourselves as a high quality, high cost, but high quality, high great experience type of brand. So the experience had to be a premium experience. So we began to use this concept of a USI in every gift that we would do to help us to get that reaction. So I guess a long way of saying it's not good enough just to send a gift. You actually have to be intentional and thoughtful about how to do it.
I appreciate, and what you just mentioned too is that the marketing itself is a premium experience, but then your fulfillment and then your customer support, the actual experience onboarding has to marry the same front end. Like it has to be matched.
Yeah. The reality is, and whether we want to admit it to ourselves or not, every single touch point that an agency or a company sends out is a reflection of your brand.
Yeah.
And that includes cold calls by the sales team and emails that go out by the client success team and your booth at the conference, and everything speaks. And so to do it right, in my opinion, you have to understand that and make sure that everything you do, all the touch points, are in alignment with the positioning that you want to have in the marketplace.
Yeah, because there's so few positioning or communication channels that are available while you're a client. Remote work makes every communication piece more important. But it's also, they don't see the behind the scenes. They don't see the hands or the website builds or the code. They don't see that. They just see small aspect, maybe 3 or 5% of what you actually do. So I appreciate that. One of the interesting pieces that I thought about, so do you have a framework of what makes something actually a unique and striking and impressive gift? Oh, don't send pens, obviously. Don't send something silly like that. But I've seen maybe podcast companies send microphones, not the whole thing, but on onboarding, they send a mic.
Yeah.
But what are some ideas of that? Like, is a book qualified there? Do you have tiers? Because some people are thinking right now, okay, send a gift. What can I send? Do you have tiers?
Well, yeah. And so there's one detail about the gift-based outbound that is actually really important to talk about, which is that you can't just send a gift once and expect it to transform your sales. That's like going to the gym once and expecting to walk away with 6-pack abs.
And then they say working out doesn't work.
Exactly. And gifting doesn't work. And how many times have you or anyone in the listening audience, have you received a gift from some vendor who randomly came in the mail and you didn't hear anything about it from them? They didn't follow up, and then that was it. And you left wondering, like, what the heck was that? And that's more of the norm. And so the way that we would do it, and the way that I teach my clients to do it, is that you base the campaign, the gift-based campaign, off of the typical product life cycle of a client. Think of it as the LTV. How many months or years does a typical client stay in your industry? At Scorpion, a client would stay for 2 to 3 years. The example that is outside of this is, on average, Americans buy a new house every 9 years, and they buy a new car every 5 years. It turns out that attorneys buy a new website every 2 to 3 years. And so we knew that once we had built an amazing list of businesses that we've curated, I call it your 20% list, we would commit to sending gifts to that attorney, because we already knew would they be a great client, for a total of 3 years every quarter. And what happens is, majority of them are going to, even though you follow up, you have a 6-step follow-up process that I teach. Even though you do all this follow-up, not 100% of them are going to respond. Some of them are going to ghost you, but it's when you send them another gift in 3 months, and then another gift in 3 months, and then another gift in 3 months. And if these are good gifts, they follow this USI principle,
Hmm.
uniquely striking and leaving a positive impression. You're building up all this amazing reciprocity. And then, of course, when you meet them at the conference or you invite them on your podcast, they will know without a doubt that you've been genuinely interested in reaching out and building a relationship with them.
Yeah, that
So,
strikes up the second. So
yeah.
LTV tying back to it, and then quarterly
Mm.
gifting, and it has to obviously
Yeah.
tie back to the main offer, the main support, like actually being
Yeah.
there. But one of the questions that I have that I haven't heard anyone else ask us is like the CAC payback period. It's how do
Yeah.
you calculate that in terms of
Mm-hmm.
being comfortable to send the gifts? Obviously, when you tie it to LTV, it's the answer's right there. But I'm
Yeah.
just curious your take around that too, because I have some
Sure.
people asking like, first of all, what do I send? That's a different question, but
We
more
can talk
about
about that. Yeah.
it's more of when you send it, it's not going to work nothing works day one. Very few things like unicorn things, 10, 50% of the time. But when you send it and you execute it, how do you balance the CAC payback period towards
Sure.
the goal and the ultimate thing that every business that I talk to is cash flow?
Sure, absolutely. The short answer is you do a self-liquidating offer, which means that you just bake the cost of the gift into the setup fee. If you don't have setup fees, then you're looking at a couple of months worth of payback. It's a couple of months to pay back the cost of all of the gifts. The
Hmm.
example I give is, let's just say that you are an agency and you charge $3,000 per month in fees. That may be high for this audience, may not be high. And they stay for 24 months, which is a LTV of $72,000. Okay, let's put that to the side for a second. Let's say you send 100 gifts that cost $100 each. That's $10,000. The expectation, being super conservative, is that as a result of being thoughtful about creating an amazing list of businesses that you should definitely send gifts to, and making sure there are no businesses on that list that you should not be sending gifts to, which has happened to folks. And you have a great list, you've done the work, and you've really investigated the vertical, come up with a USI based gift. I lost my train of thought.
Oh, good.
We're getting excited about the response. Oh, what was it? It was, sorry.
You said 72K was the LTV.
Oh, yeah. I'm so sorry. Okay. Sorry about that. So the 72K, then you spend $100 a gift times 100 gifts, $10,000, and you should expect 3 meetings and 1 sale. That's super conservative. And
Yeah.
so the sale will cost you $10,000 in gifts, right? That doesn't include commissions. But if you're charging $3,000 a month, potentially you can offset some of that with a setup fee of 1 or 2 months worth of setup fee to offset that USI cost. What happened, or the gift cost? What happens in practicality, because you're saying these quarter after quarter, you get a better return on the number of meetings and the number of closes, because they will have heard of you over time.
Yeah, the compound effect occurs, and then you have the slope coming in. Interesting. No, I like that approach because it gives the framework to think about using this as a strategy, because the zone of indifference is such a huge market to lean into. Like you mentioned in the beginning of the conversation, the med spa. Like med spa is it's a very hot market right now. Well, of course they're being hit, but if it was a different approach to make them think differently about what they're currently doing or who they are in that, that'd be pretty interesting to leverage gifts for that.
But let me build on that, because I think it is like, we tend to, as marketers, we tend to think in silos. We think about paid search or gifts. And one of the benefits of having a vertical focus, and what I talk a lot about in my books about having specializing in a vertical market, is that you do things that will help you to build your visibility, your credibility, your authority in that vertical market. And gifts is only one of them. That's a very targeted part of marketing, and it's great for generating new sales. But then also, as far as building your authority and your reputation, you mentioned this earlier, but like, you do things like join the association, and don't just join it, but become a visible member in there, add value all over the place. And start a podcast, like a very interesting podcast about the industry, about the vertical, go to the conferences, speak from the stages. There's a lot of opportunities to really take a more of a 360-degree approach to making sure that you're a known quantity in this vertical. Sure, some of the businesses in the vertical are getting gifts, but everyone's hearing about you because you're really engaged and you're really present, which again goes back to this idea of deep specialization. You're a part of the community. You're a part of that industry. Yeah.
You're entrenching yourself, which is, again, going back to, this is a more mature approach to growing your business. Besides like the tactical measures, Baker mentions 2,000 people in the target addressable market. I think you mentioned around at least annual revenue of 1 million plus, so that you're working with businesses that are sustainable. Then that's like the simple side, right? Like that's logic. I know when you work with clients, there's probably fear associated with it. How do you overcome that fear? Because it is, oh crap, like now I have to choose. What if I chose wrong? That's the biggest
Yeah.
rebuttal there. How do you work through
Well,
clients like through that idea?
what's interesting is that clients typically won't hire me until they are ready to commit.
Okay,
They,
okay, so yeah.
and what I mean by that is that what it is typically you have an agency that is founded by a charismatic founder, really great network, able to build the business through all their various different channels, EO or Vistage or their local neighborhood. And as a result of that, they grow an agency, which is great, but they've got employees, they've got clients, but there becomes a tax on every new client that comes in because you're a generalist. You have to learn that business and it becomes very difficult to scale. And so the founder in that case will typically try to do anything they can except for narrow their market. They'll hire lead gen companies and they'll outsource overseas. And of course, the chaos never leaves because there's
Yeah.
just too much variability in the business and it's hard to scale that in a meaningful way. The founder also gets stuck in a sales role because they have the most internal knowledge about what they're selling and
Mhm.
the sales team is going to get it wrong. And so they're sucked back into that. And so it's only when they are truly ready to specialize, because there's no secret about the idea or the benefits of specializing, and all of the facts are compelling, but it is, to your point, there is a fear. I think that there's an innate bias in humans that prevent us from wanting to limit the amount of opportunity. That's
Mhm.
especially true of founders of businesses. The reason why they're in business is because they said yes. And now we're asking them, or they're challenging themselves to do something that's like the complete opposite of that and start to say no to all these things, all these opportunities that are coming in the front door. And that, of course, is the psychological barrier. And I think that's one of the reasons why I wrote this book and the work that I do, is because while they conceptually understand the value of going through this process, finding someone who could take their hand and say, here's the path. And I've done all
Mhm.
the thinking, I've made all the mistakes. Let's go through this together. Let's get the result of the specialization quickly by reading the book or other means. And that typically is that's when I see them. That's when they show up in my world. Okay, I know I need to do this, and I'm looking for someone who can guide me.
To implement and execute. On that note, on the deep specialization, you mentioned med spas. I see on your LinkedIn a lot like agencies. Like, where
Yeah.
is your deep specialization the horizontal that you focus to specialize, or is it also based on a vertical in a market? Who's
So
your
my
deep specialization, like person
Yeah,
ideal?
mine is agencies. So I've got 17 years in the space, and so it is going to be a generalist agency, typically doing greater than 1 million, who's in the middle of that all that pain of being a generalist, trying to scale, tried a bunch of different things, and they're looking for sort of an expert. So that's really my focus, and how I live that is I wrote a book to targeting that audience about how to solve the problem. I go to conferences. I'm going to Miami in a couple months to go speak on a stage. I have a podcast about this. Like
Mhm.
I'm running the play for myself as
Yeah,
well, which is fun.
no, I like that. And you have a lot of
Yeah.
examples to go off of, but what would be some interesting or unique ways that you've seen either clients or agencies specialize that it's different from like your I do this for this market and XYZ?
Yeah. There's one that I love this story. It is a gentleman I interviewed on my podcast, and his name is Luke Egebrotten. He is a founder of a digital marketing agency called Phaser Marketing. And what's interesting and unique about him is that he focuses in on the construction business. And in construction, there's a 5 to 2 problem. What that means is that for every 5 people who are aging out of the industry in construction, only 2 are coming back in. At the same time, there's a tremendous demand for construction and renovation, all these things. And of course, the challenge is that a lot of this talent that would otherwise go into construction is going elsewhere. And so what the industry is dealing with is that there's maybe a lack of awareness, but then also maybe a negative stigma about working in the trades, which
Mhm.
is absolutely ridiculous because all the people who I know who work in the trades are wealthy and doing great and they have a great
Yeah.
lifestyle, right? And so one of the things that Luke has taken on as a deep specialist, he really embodied a lot of these things, is that not only is he focused in on a vertical market, which is construction, he has also started a scholarship, which he raises money for, and he gives a scholarship to a kid who is leaving high school and instead of going to college, going into the trades. So that's a big thing. He gives away a bunch of money every year. He just did it again. You can see it on his LinkedIn, Instagram. This kid holding a big check, and he won that because he's going into the trades. Luke also has a nonprofit and he raises awareness. He speaks from stages. And the reason why he does that is because he knows that this is a big problem for the industry that he is a part of now. He's not an agency on the outside. He's an agency within construction. This is a problem that the construction industry of which he is a part of is suffering from. So when ultimately at the end of the day, when you work with Luke and Phaser Marketing, you're actually funding, you're helping a business that's dedicated to helping the industry to grow versus some agency on the outside who maybe says they specialize in construction as well as dentists, as well as attorneys, and has no real compassion about the actual industry itself.
That's fascinating. It brings back to what my book mentor Zig would say is that, do you have to go that far? Do you really have to lean in that hard? And then he would be like, yeah, you can, or you can be mediocre. And I think that's a really strong, it's like a punch, but it's so true. Lean in, do it. And that's the essence of the podcast. Like, do good work. This is what else is there? Relationships, lifestyle, and then your work. Excel at that. But Corey, this was really fun. I appreciate your approach. I appreciate the book. I'll put all the links in the show notes. But for everyone listening here, where's the best place for people to thank you for being on and catch up with you?
Thank you. I appreciate this opportunity. It means a lot to me. So the great place for people to go is you can go to anyoneNotEveryone.com, and there they can download a free audiobook version of the book. So you can start listening to it today. Okay. So that's a gift to your audience. And on there, you can also get on my email list. You can find me on LinkedIn. But yeah, it's really the best place for people to get some value.
I appreciate that, man. I'll put those links in the show notes. Corey, take care, brother.
Thanks. Thanks, Raul. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the podcast. If you'd like to get more of these podcasts, please go ahead and subscribe to wherever you're watching or listening to the pod. If you have any suggestions or questions that you want me to answer on the pod, or you have a guest that you want me to interview, please go ahead and email me all of your suggestions and questions at podcast@dogoodwork.io. That's podcast@dogoodwork.io. If you'd like to give me public feedback, you can go on Apple Podcasts, and from there, you can leave up to a 5-star review. I would greatly appreciate that. If you like more free resources where you can get my best strategies to help you increase your company's performance and scale profitably, you can get handpicked articles to propel your growth, and you can get trainings and discussions that I give freely online, as well as low-cost resources such as my books and guides. You can get all of that by going to dogoodwork.io/free-growth-resources. 90% of all of these resources are not behind any email opt-ins. You can get instant access by going to dogoodwork.io/free-growth-resources. Now, if you'd like to accelerate your progress and shorten the gap between information and action and start seeing results in your business, let's work together to increase your company's performance and scale profitably and serve more clients without the overwhelm. You can request a free clarity call to see how we can best support you to reach your goals by going to dogoodwork.io/apply. Again, that's dogoodwork.io/apply. As always, it's an honor to be a small part in your journey. This is Raul Hernandez. Do good work.